Hi everyone, and welcome to the second episode of my series Battles in History. This episode will be about the Battle of Leipzig, one of the most crucial battles for Napoleon. Hopefully you'll enjoy it, and if so, please leave a comment with what battle you want me to cover next. Enjoy! The Battle of Leipzig, from 16th of October until 19th of October in 1813, was fought by coalition armies of Russia, Prussia, Austria and Sweden against the French army of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon's army also contained some Polish and Italian troops, along some Germans from the Confederation of the Rhine. The Confederation of the Rhine was a confederation of client states of the First French Empire. It was formed of 16 German states by Napoleon after he defeated Austria and Russia at the Battle of Austerlitz. In the Battle of Leipzig, more than 500,000 soldiers were involved, making it the biggest battle in Europe before the First World War. To get into more details of the Battle of Leipzig, let's first speak a bit about the background of it and what happened before the Battle of Leipzig. At the end of 1812, the march of Napoleon to Russia ended horribly, as a big part of the Grande Armée was destroyed. Of the 680,000 soldiers, only 40,000 survived. The French emperor fled to Paris, in a record time if I might say. This defeat let the people know that Napoleon was not that strong after all, yet it took some time for rebellions to form. While, slowly but surely, these rebellions were forming, Napoleon was forming his new army, as quickly and as desperately as he could. Unfortunately, it was not as simple as he thought. France was in an economic recession since 1811. Which was one of the reasons Napoleon started his campaign towards Russia. France bled and Napoleon knew it. With this thought, Napoleon knew he had to do something. That something was sending a somewhat small army, poorly trained and with bad equipment, consisting mostly of young, unexperienced men to the east. At the same time, the United Kingdom, Napoleon's sworn enemy, had already succeeded in forming the Sixth Coalition, consisting of the United Kingdom, Russia, Spain, Portugal, Prussia, Austria, Sweden, and some smaller German states, which made Napoleon sweat even more than he already did. Napoleon knew that he had to beat his enemies one by one, as he did in his campaigns of 1805, 1806 and 1809. If they were to unite against him, he would be completely hopeless. Napoleon wanted to regain his control in Germany. He succeeded in two heavy battles, the Battle for Lützen on May the 2nd and the Battle for Bautzen on May the 20th, against the Russian-Prussian troops. At the beginning of the campaign, the French army counted around 400,000 men, while the Allied forces had around 500,000 men. One advantage the French did have, however, was the central position they had, and the big number of supplies in several locations. The Allied troops were divided into three armies. Army 1, under command of Prussian Field Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. Army 2, under command of the Swedish Prince Karl XIV Johann. And Army 3, under command of the Austrian Field Marshal Karl Philipp zu Schwarzenberg. Because of Napoleon's central locations, he could attack one army at a time with the advantage of having more troops than his enemy. With some remaining troops, he could keep the other armies at a distance. Napoleon opened the campaign with a march of 130,000 men on Blücher's army, which consisted of around 95,000 men in Silesia, a historical region of what is now known as southern Poland. At the same time, Napoleon instructed Field Marshal Oudinot to march with his Army of Berlin, which was 70,000 men strong, against the Army of the North, which was 107,000 men strong. The Army of Bohemia, a historical region in what is now known as the Eastern Czech Republic, was around 200,000 men strong, but was being held at the passages of Bohemia, buying Napoleon some time. This wouldn't last forever though, as soon the Bohemian army and the Army of the North were marching on yet again. Oudinot got in a battle with the Prussian corps under command of Bülow, an ancient German/Danish noble family of Mecklenburg, and was supported by the Russians under command of Ferdinand von Wintzingerode. This led to the Battle of Groß-Beeren, a relatively small battle which Oudinot lost, forcing him to retreat. In the meantime, the army of Bohemia threatened Napoleon's army supplies in Dresden. Napoleon put his army at the river Bober under command of Field Marshal Etienne MacDonald. The Allies launched an attack, unknowingly while Dresden had a poor defense. Screams of "Vive l'Empereur" were heard, making the soldiers suspect that Napoleon himself was present. This was a sign for them to retreat. However, King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia thought that 200,000 Allied soldiers shouldn't just retreat because they heard the name Napoleon. The next 2 days, the Battle of Dresden followed, which ended in a proper victory for Napoleon. Unfortunately though, in chasing the army of Bohemia, he lost his corps of Dominique van Damme at the Battle of Kulm, making the army of Napoleon ever weaker. While these events were happening, Etienne MacDonald marched against the Allied army of Silesia. Blücher heard that Napoleon went to Dresden and marched against the French army at the Bober, which now consisted of around 90,000 men. This is where the bloody Battle of the Katzbach took place, resulting in an Allied victory. Up until now, the Allied strategy has worked just fine. Only the Battle of Dresden was lost and all other battles were won, making Napoleon more and more vulnerable. Napoleon named Michel Ney as the new commander of a strengthened army of Berlin and marched towards Blücher, who was now retreating again. Michel Ney, however, lost the Battle of Dennewitz against the army of the North. This made Napoleon change his strategy and just wait it out. Because of this, Blücher saw the chance to reunite his army with that of the North. He crossed the Elbe at Wartenburg, which also caused the Battle of Wartenburg, where he defeated the corps of Antoine Joseph Bertrand. Days after, the Prince of Sweden also crossed without any problems. By now, Napoleon had a big problem. He had very few supplies left in Dresden and he was outnumbered. Napoleon had no choice but to attack the two armies waiting at his doorstep, as he was afraid that those armies would merge together against him. Blücher wanted to attack, but the Swedish prince stuck to the strategy and they decided to retreat. Napoleon retreated to Leipzig. Napoleon's defense line under command of Field Marshal Murat was close to Leipzig, but they were confronted by the army of Bohemia. His orders were to win time for Napoleon, but also to avoid battle as much as possible. Murat did not succeed in this and was ultimately defeated in the Battle of Leibowitz. By now, Napoleon gathered all his forces to Leipzig for the last battle. General Napoleon would probably have retreated a long time ago to the Rhine, since his position was unkeepable. However, this time politician Napoleon was in charge and he knew that if he retreated, he would never regain a good position in Germany again. And if he lost Germany, what was the point of all those decennia of war? He knew he would lose his throne. Napoleon gathered his forces to defend the supply line and to resist the Allied troops. Napoleon focused his troops on a line from Tauga until Stotteritz, where he put his command post. The Austrian-Prussian-Russian army of Bohemia marched from Dresden, and the Prussian-Russian-Swedish army marched from the north and from Silesia. In total, the French had around 190,000 troops, and the Allies had around 200,000 on the 16th of October, yet this number would grow to around 330,000 troops for the Allies. The battle began on October the 16th with an attack of the army of Bohemia on the villages of Wachau and Connewitz. Napoleon made up his mind fast and decided to attack the Allied forces. Almost, just almost, Napoleon won this battle, were it not for his reserves being held up by Blücher's army of Silesia at Möckern and by General Ignaz Gyulai's Austrian corps at Lindenau. It is believed that Napoleon would have only needed one fresh new corps to make the balance shift in his advantage. The next day, only a few smaller battles took place. This day was also being used by the Allies to strengthen their troops with reinforcements like the Army of the North and the Russian Reserve Army. On the 18th of October, the Allies launched a huge attack from all fronts, and during a period of 9 hours, the French were slowly driven back to Leipzig. Both camps took heavy damage and had a lot of casualties. The sheer will of the French army prevented that the Allied army were able to break through. Napoleon knew that the battle would end badly, so on the night of October 18 to 19, he decided to pull back a majority of his force over the river Elster. All went well, but around afternoon, a scared French corporal blew up a bridge too soon, making it so that 30,000 French soldiers either needed to surrender or swim to the other side. The exact number of casualties is unknown, but it's estimated that there were between 80,000 and 110,000 deaths and wounded. Around 40,000 of them were French and 50,000 of them were Allied. 30,000 French soldiers were captured and imprisoned. By now, you can visit two places that are particularly interesting. One of them is the Volksschlachtdenkmal, a monument in Leipzig remembering the victims of this battle. Along with that, you can visit the Russian Memorial Church, built for the 22,000 Russian soldiers who died during the Battle of Leipzig. If you liked this video, please leave a comment, like the video and maybe subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future.